Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
I'm here. How you doing?
Hello, welcome, Phaedra and Royce. Wonderful that you could join. So excited for this. We're going to be starting up just a few minutes with our opening, and then we're going to turn it right into the athletes panel with Yannick and Akila.
Great. I got caught in the car today, moving around, but glad to be in on this. This is going to be cool.
No, it's amazing. No, thank you. It's awesome to have everyone. Tori, welcome. We'll get started shortly. We'll just have an opening briefly, Tony and Royce and Phaedra, and then we'll get right into the athlete panel. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes.
All right, welcome everyone. Give our panelists an opportunity, our host an opportunity to join me here on camera. We're so excited to be with you all today. My name is Erin Herbert. I am the Director of Education and Programming at the Muhammad Ali Center. And the Muhammad Ali Center is very honored and proud to continue to be a partner on this important conversation, this important forum and discussion to continue Muhammad's life and legacy through the discussion of the powerful and unique platform that sport and athletes and sport professionals have in creating and building a more just and inclusive world for all. So we are very pleased and very happy and really sincerely privileged to be a part of this important conversation today, this important effort. But we couldn't be here without our wonderful partners who have really brought us together today. Mary Holmes from the University of Louisville, who's been an incredible friend and ally to the center for many, many years. Thank you so much. Dr. Yannick Klug, who is really been the person keeping us on track, who's been making sure that this effort could actually come to be. We would not be here today without Yannick, so thank you so much. And of course, our long-term friend, our partner, our ally at the center, who is the life and the passion and the reason that this program exists, Eli Wolf. Eli, thank you for your continued friendship, and let me turn it over to you to take us through the rest of our program.
Excellent. Well, no, thank you so much, Erin, and thank you to the Ali Center and really everyone that's come together around this initiative and program, and Mary and I, and others, all of our friends and colleagues, we've all really worked so hard, for several weeks, several months now to pull this together. So it's really amazing that we're all here today. I'm going to actually turn it over to Mary. Mary, you want to share a couple remarks, and then then we have a video from Gwen Berry we're going to share, and then we'll introduce our moderators and then get right into the panel.
All right. Well, thank you, Eli. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, welcome everyone, wherever you might be. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you're joining us around the world for our seminar today. Welcome to the beautiful city of Louisville virtually, and our gem of an establishment, the Muhammad Ali Center, that is here in Louisville, Kentucky. Here in Louisville, the letter L is really important to us. And so I was thinking about that today, just with my remarks, and I thought, today we're going to have the opportunity to listen and to learn from all these leaders, and how listening and learning from leaders will help us make decisions in how to live our lives in using sport to promote social justice. And one more L, what a legacy this would be. Erin, what would Muhammad Ali say today if he saw this as part of the legacy of the Ali Center and this program? I think he'd be happy. I think he'd be proud. That is for sure. So we welcome everyone from wherever you are. We got some great panels today. Got a couple of really, really inspiring videos. Eli had mentioned the first one, which is going to be Gwen Berry, who of course is a U.S. Olympian. So she's going to sort of be our kickstart here, if you will. And Eli, can I tell them who the next one's going to be then? So they.
Yeah, before the next panel. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, before the next, so we have our athlete panel first, stakeholder panel second, and before that second panel, we will have, again, a video recorded message from Dr. Richard Labchik, who many of you know, of course, is an iconic sport and human rights activist. So it's going to be a great afternoon. And Eli, I'm going to turn it over to you so that we can get everything started. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Well, no, just again just to say thank you all for joining today and for this really important, conversation, really timely, everything happening in the world right now, and where are we going? How are we organizing? This whole conversation around collective action. Really looking forward to it, and really kind of how we're coming out of today with call to actions. Really having the athletes, stakeholders, really driving that. But we are going to start off with a brief video from Gwen. Gwen is actually at the Olympic trials right now. She, of course, want to be here with us, and she has a nice message. And then we're going to go right into turning it over to our two moderators to then get right into the athlete panel.
So y'all just forgive me one moment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll pull up that video and we'll watch it together. Gwen's handle, if anyone liked it, right there.
Hello, my name is Gwendolyn Berry, 2016 Rio Olympic camera thrower. And I'm here with the Muhammad Ali Center to talk about the importance of amplifying athletes' voices in and out of the sport. I feel like this topic resonates with me so much because of the things I had gone through in 2019 when I decided to protest at the Pan American Games. Because of that protest, I was sanctioned. I was silenced for 12 months. And if I had broke that sanction, I probably would have been kicked out the sport that I had sacrificed so much for and that I was ultimately so good at. I feel like us athletes need to realize that being icons is not enough. Being amazing athletes is not enough, because the communities that have raised us, that has shown us the most support and the most love, are under attack. We need to give back to our communities, and we also need to create effective change in our communities. And how can we do this? We do this politically. We have to change laws. We have to go to the Senate. We have to speak up for our communities. We have to demand equality in terms of voting, economics, reparations, education. All of those things are important to the communities that have raised us and that have supported us. And yet, our very same communities are lost. They're forgotten about. They're not even considered. Especially our Black lives. We're getting killed every day at the hands of police who do not value us. I feel like this topic is extremely important. I am so sorry that I'm not able to be a part of it, but I do hope that my words of encouragement, my platform, and the work that I am trying to do resonates with somebody and everybody so that we can create change, essential change, because it has to work. Our communities depend on it. I want to thank the Muhammad Ali Center for their continuous support and fight to bring equality and justice to Black lives, Black communities, impoverished neighborhoods, and those people who are marginalized because of the racist system here in America. I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you guys for always including me, and let's have a great forum. Hello, my name is Gwendolyn Berry.
Awesome. Well, no, it's really just to have Gwen with us, with her words and her power. And really, I feel like this is a great way to kick us off with our athlete panel. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Yannick and Akila. We're really honored to have amazing experts and moderators. Akila with the San Jose State Institute for the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change, and Yannick with the Virginia Commonwealth Center for Sport Leadership. So without further ado, I'll turn it over, and then we're going to get right into our athlete panel. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of you all. I'm Dr. Akilah Carter-Francique. I serve again as the Executive Director for the Institute for the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change. Glad to be here today with my co-moderator, and he will introduce himself today, and we'll get started into today's messaging.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Akilah. Hi, everybody. We are super excited to have you with us. My name is Dr. Yannick Kluch. I'm an assistant professor for sport leadership and director of inclusive excellence in the Center for Sport Leadership at VCU. Akilah and I are super excited to have you with us. We have an all-star panel of athlete activists, and we are really excited to get to those in just a second. Of course, we are coming off of a year that has been historic in a lot of ways. Not just because of the pandemic that is COVID, but also because there have been renewed calls for racial justice in the context of the brutal murders of Black and Brown Americans across the country that have rocked the world, really. And while we have seen waves of athlete activism before, athletes have always been at the forefront of social movements. There are some unique moments in this current point in time. So we're excited to kind of dive into those in a little bit more detail. And think about, as Eli said, how we can organize collectively to drive systemic change. I also want to say that we really strategically wanted to kick off this forum this year with an athletes panel. Athletes' voices, as Gwen said, are so powerful. And the very fact that Gwen, was present in space is, I believe, literally competing right now in the trials is such a testament to the power of our athlete voices. So I want to make sure that we give them as much space as we can and hear their powerful stories and learn from them as they drive political power and collective action over the past decades, really. Before we turn over to our panelists, I want to make sure we go over a couple of just logistics. You will see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A function. Please feel free to submit questions for our panelists throughout the session. We will be having a Q&A at the end of the session, so please keep those questions coming. Akilah and I will be going through those in a lot of detail, so please keep them coming throughout the session. We will also be utilizing the chat. You already saw we are going to be posting a couple of links as we go through the panel, so keep an eye on that one as well. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Akilah to introduce our awesome panelists. Akilah, take it away.
I am super excited, so happy to be here and so happy to be in the presence of such greatness and such excellence with the athletes that we have here, former athletes, Olympians, Paralympians, just all world and everything that they do, and those that are definitely involved in civic engagement, in understanding the responsibility and the platform that each of them has to utilize their voice to promote social change. So without further ado, I want to introduce our athlete panelists. First, we have WNBA champion Alana Beard coming to us. And again, as we go through these names, please look at their social media handles, tag them, follow them, like them, all of those wonderful things. But again, Alana Beard, thank you for being here with us. Team USA Olympian, foil fencer, Grace and Bowden, thank you for being here today. And Team USA Paralympian swimmer, Anna Johannes, thank you for being here today. We also have joining us on this great panel, Hall of Fame rugby player and president of the Women's Sports Foundation, Phaedra Knight. We have former athlete and senior organizer of New York City Civil Liberties Union, Tony Smith Thompson. And finally, we have Minneapolis organizer, civil rights activist, and former professional basketball player, Royce White. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. And I'll take the first question. We just heard an awesome video from Gwen reflecting on the conference theme, which this year specifically is collective action, the political power of athletes and sport. Obviously, all of our panelists, you have shown how to utilize collective action. So for our first question, we would like for you to reflect on what this theme means to you. What does the theme mean to you personally, to your journey as an activist, as an athlete? And based on that experience, how can athletes strengthen their political power, both individually and collectively? And Alana, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Yannick. Thank you for having me here. It's an extreme honor to sort of be on this panel with individuals who have done so many things within sort of their career and space. But as I sort of think about the theme and read the theme, the one word that stands out to me is collective, right? That's something that I've always believed in. I do believe that at times people tend to sort of venture out on their own and believe that they can sort of move mountains, as an individual, but I do believe in the power of collective movement. I've had the privilege of playing in the WNBA for 15 years, and sort of being at that intersection where it's two different generations, right? In the sense that I came in where I like to refer to that athlete as a traditional athlete who was extremely grateful for the opportunity that they had, to where they believed in just sort of keeping their head down and working and pushing forward, but they also didn't have sort of the privilege and the platform that social media provides to us. And then I've been able to sort of see that change, or that transition to the current athlete who has that social media platform, and they're not afraid of sort of just using their voice to stand for what's right. And I think all of us witnessed that sort of last year with the WNBA being at the forefront of just pushing for change and standing for what they really believe in. So it's been a privilege and an honor to sort of be a part of that and sort of see the transitioning of generations. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Alana. Anna, we'll go to you next. What does the conference theme mean to you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on this panel. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for about a year, so close to my heart for sure. I too so identify with the word collective. I think every athlete has to be passionate. You can't have passion and go to the games or be a professional athlete. And so that carries on into who we are as people. And when who you are as a person is being attacked in different ways, you're obviously very passionate about that. And I think what's important about the collective is that all of the injustices, justices, all of it really overlaps, and we can't grow without growing each other. Justice isn't a pie, right? If someone gets more justice, it's not less for anyone else. So I think uplifting and working together to uplift stories from across sports and industries and minorities and things like that is just so important. So I think it's such a good topic for this conversation, and something that can carry forward more.
Absolutely. From our first Team USA member to our second Team USA member, Race, what are your thoughts? Oh, Race, I think we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me now?
You got it, yep.
You go. Firstly, let me say that I'm honored to be here with an amazing group of people. And also, anytime the name Muhammad Ali comes up, it still gives me chills. Growing up, having him as a role model has always been something that's been a massive impact on me. And I think the idea, like Alana said, of a collective is the word that stood out for me as well. And for me, a collective kind of reflects the idea of activism and advocacy. For me, it's about coming together as a group and uniting and being a team. And one thing that athletes know how to do is be a team. And one of the main subjects that I think that reflects on, and Muhammad Ali also reflects on, is it's about all of us, and that unified front of being a team together and taking care of each other and coming out and standing strong allows you to do that individually, but also as a collective, and then combine those two efforts into kind of what I like to think is as teamwork. And so for me, it reflects greatly when sports and those activism traits comes together. And I think that we're gonna expand on it today, but mostly I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
Definitely will expand on those ideas. Thank you, Race. Phaedra, what does the conference theme mean to you?
Oh man, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an incredible honor to be here with all of you and share this moment. for me, this theme is everything, right? Collective action. That's everything that at least the last year has really exemplified. And you have certain athletes, certain individual athletes who essentially command a very large platform. You know, LeBron, you know, Osaka, but for everyone who's not LeBron and Osaka, they can have a very collective effect. And we've seen it. We've seen it with the WNBA. Although you've had standouts like Maya Moore and Natasha Cloud, who've really kind of stepped beyond the masses in their efforts, you have the entire WNBA that came together and they essentially led the way. Although the NBA has gotten a ton of the media and the credit, it was the WNBA that really paved the way with the social justice and Black Lives Matter movement over the last 12 months, right? You had the NFL, and it wasn't just one individual player, it was a collective with that 70-second ad that came out around the George Floyd killing. There were a number of them, right? You had Tyrann Mathieu, you had DeAndre Hopkins, right? Names, Patrick Peterson, that you don't so commonly hear. So you had this collective of athletes. You even had, you know, in my world, you had the U.S. women's and men's rugby team. You had not just the U.S. teams, but you had the entire rugby community come together. You had USA Rugby referees that came together and they put together these powerful messages. And so I think it's incredibly important and the alignment here with the theme of this event and what has transpired over the last 12 years, there's so much synergy. In my own little personal world, even, you know, little Phaedra Knight, I thought it was very important to raise the profile of athletes because I think it's so important for those that aren't, like I said, the Osakas and the LeBron Jameses, to be heard and to be known. And so, you know, for me, I started a clothing line, right, PSK Collective, that essentially creates an opportunity for athletes who we don't necessarily know to raise their profile, to engage in the social justice movement with impact and effect, and to also benefit an organization, the Women's Sports Foundation, that has done so much to really push the barrier, really push the limits, break through the ceiling on pay equity, on Title IX, on women's advocacy in sport and beyond. And so this theme, going back to it, it means a great deal. It's everything right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Phaedra. And I know we shared some of the links already on the slide, but the Women's Sport Foundation is definitely an organization you want to follow if you are not doing that already on Twitter and other social media. Royce, tell us what the theme means to you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first I want to say this is one of the great honors of my life. I think for me as a Black male athlete, Muhammad Ali is a central idol of mine. And I think that from an athlete standpoint, he should be one of the central models of righteousness for all of us and beyond, well beyond sports as well. And so this is just a true honor of mine. And I would say, you know, to the point of the theme, I think under the last, you know, in the last 18 months living in this country and around the world, we have really seen how false our sense of security is underneath the status quo. You know, and I think that when we talk about Muhammad Ali or we use him as an example, he was somebody who really pushed against the status quo, and he pushed against the status quo on many fronts. And not only the fight against an unjust war, but fight against other more subtle racially unjust politics and things of that nature. So, you know, I think that when we talk about collectivism, I think we have to be aware that any real transformation is ultimately going to come through a collective fight, a unified front. But I think we also have to understand and be willing to accept that there's a real conversation to be had about what the winning ideas will be in our collective fight, and how self-sacrifice has to be at the forefront of that, and how historical context has to also play a very prominent role in the things we're trying to change. So I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Royce. And last but certainly not least, Tony, what does the conference theme mean to you?
Hey, I'm Tonya. Use she, her pronouns. I'm thrilled to be here. Not thrilled about my background noise, so I do apologize. I echo a lot of what's been said already. I especially want to uplift what Phaedra was highlighting with the work of the WNBA, and that is what I have been thinking a lot about when I think about collective action, is that I think the WNBA players have been a really great model for collective, not just meeting among athletes, but athletes in partnership with communities who are directly impacted, who are pushing for change in their communities, pushing the solutions that will actually work in their communities. I think, because athletes have a very specific platform, actually using that platform in partnership with people in communities is like the ultimate definition of collective that I'm holding at the forefront for today.
Awesome. As you can see, we have 6 awesome panelists. We'll dive into a lot of the great things they brought up, and I'm going to turn over to Akila for our next couple of questions.
Yes, such a great start and opening message with regards to athlete activism, but again, that collectivist nature. I'm really curious to understand, I think our audience is as well, of how you all sort of came to be, sort of that notion of developing of an activist persona. And one of the narratives that we often hear when it comes to athlete activists is that they should stick to sports, or as we've heard, shut up and dribble. But of course, it's a myth that sports is or should be an apolitical space. With that said, some of you have left sport to pursue social or political activism. Others of you are very much still involved in sport, using sport, continuing to perform, but using it as a platform to drive change at a systemic level. And so I want to go to our current sort of athletes right now, if you will, Alana, Anna, and Race. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have found and developed your activist power? More specifically, what motivated you to use your voice for activist purposes, and how have you found that power within your voice and your platform? So I want to start with Race with that question.
I think that it's a great question. I think the first person I have to thank for that is my parents, probably, and the city that I grew up in. I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn, and being around a large, diverse crowd of people with the parents who were very open to the cultures in the city that surrounded them allowed me to have a fresh and open view of the people that I loved and was surrounded by, and friends and family, and really had a sense of community that was diverse and different. And I carried that over into a sport that is predominantly white and predominantly elitist, and saw immediately a vast change in my surroundings. Going from there into school, into a school that allowed me to fence full time, was even, a larger reflection of that elitist and white crowd. And then making my Olympic team, I was surrounded by a diverse group of athletes. Our team is actually the highest level of athletes. It's diverse. We have a large group of athletes who come through the Peter Westbrook Foundation, who is an amazing athlete, an Olympic medalist, who created a foundation in the city for inner city youth and supported kids' defense. And that was a role model for me, even though I wasn't part of it. When I made my first Olympic team, my coach asked me to give back, and I started teaching kids in Harlem and bringing those kids from Harlem down into the clubs that I was a part of, which I would have never had the opportunity to be in if my coaches didn't support me. And what I started to realize that growing up with, my family didn't have the most money growing up, and to fence, you needed it. I suddenly relied on the support of others and the kind of kindness to be able to be who I was, which led me to be an Olympian and a world #1 and a world champion. That then carries over to when you become the top of your sport and you look around you and you start to see that you're representative of something more. You're representative of your nation, and you're representative of your teammates, and you're representative of those who are around you and those who aren't around you. And for me, the protest that I took a knee at the Pan American Games in 2019 alongside Gwen Berry in a different event, was the area that caused the most, I guess you could call it, garnered the most attention. But I had actually kneeled months and months before that when Kaepernick had been protesting at a World Cup that we had won in Cairo, which garnered no attention. And for me, they were exactly the same. They were an expression of me supporting those people around me and the few followers that I had in my little circle to show what I believed was important, which wasn't actually the medal or the victory, but realistically the communities and the things that they represented and the lessons in life and the opportunities that sport allowed me. And that is the opportunity that I wanted everyone to have. When I took a knee, I was put on probation, just like Gwen Berry, and to come back around all the way around, that collectivism then turned into working with Dr. Yannick and working with the Social Justice Council at the USOC, trying to abolish Rule 50, which predominantly affects Black athletes. And I think that's kind of my story of becoming an activist. And the strength came from within, but it really it came from a reflection of the world around me, and being lucky enough to see that, and then having the platform to speak out and being great because of the privilege and the kindness of others. That was what it reflected for me. And then it turned into a time after the death of George Floyd that I could then transfer that platform that I had into helping the Black athletes and community in the USOC, outside of the USOC. And I'm also part of Everytown for against gun violence in the Athlete Council for Everytown, which is the largest gun violence prevention organization in the US, which again is about a collective group coming together to support a larger cause that affects all of the things that we've been talking about and been trying to fight in the US currently. So that's a little bit of my story, but I think it really is a reflection of my environment, and honestly, great role models all around me all the time since I was growing up in sport.
It's so great to hear role models, parents, coaches planting seeds and exposing you to those experiences of sort of have and have nots and how to use your platform in a broader space. Such a great story. Anna, I want to go to you in this same question of what motivated you to use your voice for activist purposes?
Yeah, it's a good question. And growing up, so I was born without my left hand and forearm. And I think when you live with something that's on your skin, literally on your sleeve, if you will, you kind of fight from the beginning, whether you choose to or not. And so it took me a while to really understand this. And I ended up having to retire back in 2016 for career-ending surgery. But it really started back in 2013, which was a smaller surgery, but my body just couldn't bounce back from. But what kept me going for those 3 years is I just wanted to make a difference. And I felt like without being an athlete, I couldn't make a difference. I kind of felt like if I retired, no one was going to listen. I didn't have a platform and I couldn't really make change. So, within those 3 years, I held on and I just kind of thought about where my voice could be heard and where other disabled voices could be heard, and how to fight, get the Paralympics on the TV more, right? So we can see this and have more, there's not a lot of famous disabled people to look up to. So how do I change that for the younger generation? And so, like I said, I had to retire and I thought I lost my voice. And I thought, this is it. Like, what am I going to do now? And so I retired from a swimming career and went into, the career that I am in now, and kind of on the other side of things in marketing, if you will. And so, after being told to just put my head down and swim, like it's been discussed, athletes weren't really encouraged to voice, but I realized that I could kind of change it from the other side and have these conversations I worked for a swim company and made sure that they hired their first Paralympian to be on their team. I worked at a hospital and made sure that they were telling the stories of every patient. So it's not just the ones that go in and are fixed and everything's fine, but the community and those who are lifelong patients. And now in marketing, I run the Disability Inclusion Task Force. I'm also the JEDI champion is what we call it for the office. And so I've just been able to build up that and realize that it didn't take having to be an athlete to have a voice. I just had a voice. And so it took a really long evolution to kind of get to where I am now and be comfortable talking and continue to learn every day, whether it's about disability, ableism and sexism and racism and all these things, and just continuing to educate myself and make sure that the platform, the small platform that I may or may not have, continues to have voices, not just disabled voices, but all voices. So that's kind of how I really found my voice, and hopefully continue to keep using it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing again. It's sort of this notion of multiple identities. And sometimes, again, as athletes, we have this, my colleague will be speaking later, Dr. Joseph Cooper's notion about athlete identity foreclosure, but how it comes into that's what you only think that you are. So it was interesting to hear that you felt you would have lost your voice or platform if you weren't an athlete anymore, where oftentimes we have that going the other direction. So thank you for sharing that, and the notion of this notion of intersectionality, multiple careers, multiple hats that you can wear. And I think you definitely represent that. So thank you for sharing that voice and the fact that you can use your platform in multiple ways, not just as an athlete. Alana, same question to you. What motivated you to use your voice, and how have you found that power within your voice?
No, these are all great questions, and just listening to Anna and Race, and those are the individuals who motivate me to honestly find my voice. On top of that, having a 2-year-old son who is of Jewish and African American descent, just trying to educate myself and figure out as a parent how I want to move him and develop him within this world. So that forces me to search a little deeper, to do things that I've never done before, to really understand the level of systemic racism that he may face, that he will face moving forward, and how, as a mother, do I deal with that, right? But on top of that, in all honesty, I'm still finding my voice. And I am now okay with saying that, because I guess I'm retired now. I retired in January of 2020, but I regret, and I've questioned, did I really take advantage of the platform that I had? Because I kind of, I was in between sort of that traditional WNBA player and sort of the current WNBA player, in the sense that you put your head down, you work. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. Grew up with parents who both have a high school sort of education, and were just blue collar workers, right? They knew that they had to get up every day to figure out a way to provide for their families, and they didn't have very much to say on sort of the side of racism, right? So that's kind of how I grew, that's how I was developed. But now that I have this platform, I understand that it's up to me and it's my responsibility to push things forward. So I say all of that to say that I am now finding my voice, and it's people like Anna, it's people like Race, it's the WNBA, and sort of just being able to sort of engage and play at that level, but also to understand that these individuals understand the power that they have in their voice has empowered me to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. There is that culture in sport that says, yes, put your head down, hard work, and you just go that way. So it's great to see the different phases and waves of people pushing back and using that, but also to hear your muses. Alana, like you, have got kids, and they keep me motivated and also remind me of why I do what I do. So thank you for sharing that story as well. As we move into our next question, we want to sort of see from our those that have been sort of have moved or retired, if you will, and utilizing their platform in that civic engagement space, that leadership space, and understanding the approach to activism. So one of the things is, while we have, over the past year, we have really seen an increase in, as I say, conversations from our Institute for the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change, Join the Conversation. We've seen these increased conversations on issues related to race and racial justice over the past year. We've also witnessed how the powers that be have attacked other vulnerable and marginalized populations. For example, legislators in more than 30 US states are currently trying to pass anti-trans legislation. So this is going to go to Royce, Phaedra, and Tony. Could you share with our audience, particularly our rising activists, and I say rising in the fact that it doesn't necessarily mean young, it could be new to it, as Alana just shared with us, coming into that identity. Could you share with us, how do you decide what social justice issue to focus on? And how can we make sure that we advance social justice in intersectional ways while providing sort of these nuanced solutions to particular issues? And so with that, I'm going to start with Royce.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a good question. I guess I'll start with saying that to double back on the last question, add a little bit of context here that I think applies to this one. My advocacy started around mental health and the advocacy of mental health policy and a change of attitude within the NBA, and ultimately professional sports, but even bigger than that, the corporate world. And I think that mental health is the greatest intersection of social justice. To be honest, I wholly believe that mental health is the common denominator. It's the it's the issue that strikes right at the human condition on the most fundamental level, and it includes all of us. So I acknowledge mental health as the true point of intersection first and foremost. And I think, for me and being in the NBA and being blackballed for trying to bring about mental health policy and things of that nature, I have to say that it's important. It's just as important for us to make sure that we're acknowledging what the fundamental issues are while we bring our own personal experience. For me, I'm a Black man, right? I'm heterosexual, and I'm proud of that. And I believe all people should have equal rights and people should be treated with humanity and dignity. But we also do have to stratify certain issues. And I think that there is a very sinister and manipulative corporate game that is being played, which is why I advocated so hard in the NBA. It wasn't because NBA players need better mental health care. I agree that that is the case and that the NBA is trying to either pigeonhole or straw man issues around the human conditions because of their corporate interests, such as like with the alcohol industry and other industries as well, or even just the general nature of soliciting athletes for financial gain in the broad sense. But the bigger issue is that the NBA and these professional sports leagues represent a global corporate community. And our attitudes towards humanity and the human condition and the global corporate community is what we have to talk about. And within that, that dynamic is not unknown, but it goes untethered, right? And so we see that our political action starts to devolve into our own individual personal experience, and we lose sight of that 30,000-foot view. And within that, we actually end up following and idolizing people who don't deserve our idolization. And even in this conversation already, LeBron James' name was mentioned, and it's just like, I would be remiss to come to a panel underneath the name of Muhammad Ali, who truly sacrificed something incredible to speak to human issues around the world, and not speak on the fact that there's 2 million Muslim Uyghurs in a concentration camp in China. And LeBron has yet to mention them one time because of his own corporate interests with Nike and other Chinese affiliations. And the barrier between an honest and just society isn't people's mistakes. It isn't people's transgressions. It's self-interest, right? So my advice to the young athletes would be, once again, to double back on my first statement, that the glory will come through self-sacrifice. And that's what Muhammad Ali is a true model of. He said, at the height of my career, in my prime, I'm going to do something that could absolutely not only end my career, but end my comfortable life as I know it. And that's worthwhile because like MLK said, like LeBron retweeted MLK saying, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And we have to continue to really commit to that idea, because I think it's spot on, and we can't let our own self-interest get in the way of that.
Okay, we're having some mic dropping moments here, and dropping of extreme knowledge and awareness, and the opportunity to also use your platform to challenge other athletes to think more, again, globally, and be mindful of the realities that are also happening today. Phaedra, I take it to you,
Yeah.
Women's Sports Foundation, and all that you've done as well. Again, how do you choose a social justice issue to focus on? And how can we make sure that we are sort of speaking to particular issues, both large and small?
Well, listen, great comments. Just to follow up on Royce, you're so spot on with the mental health comment. It's the most stigmatized thing out there, right? And has received the least amount of real acute attention that it needs. And the motivation piece, the things that motivate us are absolutely self-interest. And there's no better example of that than just looking at the last 4 years. I mean, it happens all the time, right? But it's just been brought to life in our political platform, in our political landscape, right? It's just personal interest. People can't get beyond their own needs and desires. And although I hear you in the LeBron James comment, I know that there are a lot of, different social justice issues out there. And so we can't necessarily attack them or tackle them all at once, but we can certainly line them up and put them in the queue. And so 100% agree with you on that. Now, for me, I have, as president of Women's Sports Foundation, I've been lobbying, I've been doing doing that for years to fight in the fight for equity in women's sports. And that's just a little drop in the bucket, right? That's just going, to our nation's capital and sitting down, for a couple of hours talking to our legislators, and that, has some small and mild impact. But, the work comes from, again, from what Royce said earlier, that collective, constant, nonstop push, right? If you want to talk about intersectionality, you're looking at it, right? I'm a woman, I'm Black, I'm gay, and so, in terms of looking at things from a social perspective, I'm at the bottom of the barrel. The only thing that's missing is I'm not trans. And so everything I do and everything I am comes through a lens of intersectionality. And so, again, the things that I have tried to do to just help make sure that we can, advance is to use every opportunity I have to talk about it. This past weekend, you mentioned, I'm also, although I'm a retired rugby player, I recently started training, or at least a couple of years ago, started training for mixed martial arts, for MMA, with the aspiration of fighting at the professional level. And so what I've decided to do is every time I have an opportunity to be on camera, or to be in front of people, or just to wear something that reminds people that, pay equity is not a thing amongst women and men. So let's do something about that. There are people who are incarcerated who shouldn't be, or just to remind people of our unjust judicial justice, social justice, or I'm sorry, penal system. So let's bring that front and center to your attention. And so I wear patches. I wear t-shirts that echo these things, so that, again, it's a reminder. And again, it's a tiny drop in the bucket, but it is a reminder and a way to keep it front and center in the attention of people, so that they can get beyond their own personal motivation and they can see into the lives of what other people may experience. And so I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Again, issues large and small, but we also have to find those things that speak in our wheelhouse and that we're comfortable doing. I think you've shared that, and find different ways to share. Fashion is one of those ways that I know a lot of people are demonstrating that. Tony, to you, again, as senior organizer with the New York Civil Liberties Union, talk to us a little bit about how you choose those particular issues.
Sorry. You know, I'm thinking a lot about Royce's comments, which I think also were spot on. I come to this work, I'm an organizer now, I'm a professional organizer now, but I came to this work as a college athlete who was protesting, refusing to salute the American flag in 2002, 2003, in the immediate post 9/11 America. And so, you know, how I choose to focus where the issues that I work on always carries some personal experience or story where I have a specific lens to lend to the conversation. And a lot of the conversations about sports and politics and race and police, a lot of those conversations, you know, in the kind of years 2003 through 2018, sometimes there seemed to be a void, not because there weren't people actually doing the work, but in events like this, it seemed like there was a dearth in the certain voices. And so I was often asked to lend you know, my experience because it was in the middle of that intersection between anti-war, like nationalism, patriotism, racism, and all of these intersections, which is really the trajectory that I've continued on as I've grown my career. And, you know, so I think obviously we want people to care about issues that do not personally affect them. We want people to be taking action. That doesn't mean that everyone should be doing or needs to do everything. And so I think for issues where I don't have a personal experience to come from, as an ally, I make sure that I have a specific purpose that is wanted and helpful. I think it's very, you know, why I mentioned, Royce, your comments is to the first question that was asked of us about collective power, especially with athletes who are professional and amassing way more wealth than athletes did in the past. It is really easy to think, if only I did something, this issue would change. This issue would be solved. This issue would be different, which is a very individualistic way of thinking about change. And so I think it is very easy for athletes to get sucked into this myth that if only I have more power individually, then we will all have more power collectively. And it actually doesn't work like that. And so, you know, and as you amass more individual power, you have a stake in maintaining that individual power, which is actually antithetical to collective power. So thanks for highlighting that, Royce. But that's how I think about where I direct my effort. And then in terms of like intersectionality, because I can't do everything and I shouldn't do everything, I work really hard to make sure the issues that I'm working on don't undercut other issues in the way that they're presented. So I think it's really easy for us in our individual fights to kind of craft arguments that are very serving our individual issue, but are actually undercutting another issue unintentionally. Like, you know, for example, when you're talking about immigration, a lot of times the arguments rest on like skills that are highly desired by our economic market, which really then sends the message that people who are not desired for their skills don't have the right to come here. So just being really thoughtful about not putting too much emphasis on those who deserve, and by default creating an othering of people who don't deserve, which is obviously not true.
Thank you so much. All good points. Again, large and small, personal agendas, and having some attachment to those particular issues is one way that we can think about choosing different social justice engagements, but is at the same time beginning to work with others to support and serve as an ally. So thank you for sharing that. And we're going to move to our next segment. And I want to again invite everybody as we move to invite you to use that Q&A box. Should you have questions, start formulating them, getting ready to put them in, and we'll have a short Q&A following the end of the segment. Yannick, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so many great responses already. I want to focus a little bit on the this idea of, you know, we are activists. We focus on this idea of being impactful, both individually and collective. But I want to focus on this question of what's next. How can we sustain our activism? And I'm going to give this back to Royce and Tony. How are each of you making sure that we sustain this momentum, or how can we create the infrastructure to drive action when the momentum can't be sustained so we can still drive systemic change? Tony, we'll go back to you for that one, and then we'll go to Royce.
All right, thank you. You know, especially in this period, you know, it's hard to say like in this period, this is different than it's ever been. Like there's always been sustained resistance and sustained action. But I do really think it's important, especially in these moments of like hyper visibility of social movements, that we are creating infrastructure between people and communities so that people can flow in and flow out. And so we're prioritizing care, mental health care, right? So folks don't feel like I have to be out on the street every single day, putting my body on the line, putting my voice on the line every single day. I think that is a huge part of the sustainability. I think making sure that especially when we're talking about sports, that athletes are nurturing and being nurtured to develop authentic relationships in communities and with communities. So there's constantly this evolving understanding of the needs on the ground and emerging trends, so that we're not caught in like the same narrative past the point at which it's useful or helpful. And especially now with social media, right? Like language evolves really rapidly, trends evolve really rapidly. And so like I'm already thinking of, not like I'm like ahead of the curve, but right, for me, a year and a half ago, I was like, 20th anniversary of 9/11 is right around the corner. What is the propaganda that's going to be put out that's going to be driving narratives? What are police going to look like in the venue of sports? How is that going to drive the ability for us to hold police accountable? Like, how do we get ahead of that? And how do we bring young people into those understandings who are looking for their place? And how, as an adult, can I be an adult ally to like clear some of those roadblocks for young people so that they're not bearing the brunt of the blowback? So a lot of the sustainability for me is about like the authentic relationship building and making sure that younger folks coming up and trying to find their way are not unnecessarily meeting roadblocks. And that I'm not one of those roadblocks as an adult. That's like, we did that already. So not trying to be that person.
Awesome. I love that advice, especially this piece about the authentic relationships. I think that's so important. Thank you, Tony. Roy, same question for you. How can we sustain that momentum? How can we create the infrastructure to sustain that collective action to drive change?
Well, I think first, we have to be honest about the history of the change or the fight that we're in. I know for me, as a Black man and obviously dealing foremost with the issue of police violence and our fight for, you could say, sovereignty, with the state here in America and around the world. We've been fighting this fight a long time with the police. And I think that we've been, as well as we've been persecuted and oppressed, a byproduct of that has been a conditioning of self-doubt. And so we see ourselves pulling for the low-hanging fruit of many of these political actions where we say, well, what is it that I can do? Well, when I look at a person like Muhammad Ali, he shot for the stars with his activism. He's like, I could literally stop a war halfway around the world if I do X. And so I think part of that has to do with identifying what systems what systems that we need to be pushing back against, right? So, for example, is it, for me as a Black man even, is it Donald Trump that I'm really worried about, or is it the Federal Reserve, right? I mean, I know what an ethno-nationalist, white supremacist, bigoted, asshole, pardon my language, rich billionaire who was inherited money looks like. I know what that looks like. And that's a part of the narrative. So has that become the status quo for us to spend our energy denouncing and detracting against a scapegoat of sorts? Meanwhile, we let the Federal Reserve operate with impunity and continue to work with a global economy to predate on the continent of Africa and extract trillions of dollars from a place that they claim to be trying to help and develop, right? And so like that's where my mind is how do I get the people in my immediate, and then it's in your community, what does that look like? So for example, when we went to march and protest after George Floyd was murdered, yeah, we went to the police precinct, we went to the government center, but we made sure we stopped at the Federal Reserve. And we made sure we left red paint out on the street outside of it to let them know that the blood on the hands of the police department and the government officials trickles all the way down here to the bank sector of our metropolitan as well. And we're not unaware of that. We're not naive to that. And so to speak back to my first point, when I made the comment about LeBron, it's not even that I'm really in opposition of the work that he's done. I think it's great. I think that there's a subtle discouragement from us going at the issues that would strike right at the heart of the system. And we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're willing to sacrifice, not what will Donald Trump change. It's not what will Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum change. It's what are we willing to do to force them to change? And that's the ultimate question. What am I going to do personally? And so for us, even in Minneapolis here at the epicenter, it's, yeah, we know that qualified immunity must go, but we also know that Black people get 3% of the loans on a 14% population. And we also know that there's a very powerful white eugenics culture politically in this country that not only wants to oppress and suppress the rise of a Black economy, but they also would like to oppress and suppress the rise of a Black population in gender, and I mean in general. So you talk about issues such as Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, and then you have to be willing to put yourself in the crosshairs of political controversy in order to even open these conversations up. And I'll say this right here. Do I believe that a woman's reproductive system is and her decision with doctors are way too personal for everybody in American politics and governors and all of them to be in the room with the doctor? Absolutely. That's too many people in a room with a woman and her doctor. But when it comes to Black women, we do have to understand that a white woman said that she would use abortion and Planned Parenthood to annihilate a Black population. And so both things can be confronted and discussed and acknowledged, and then we can really get to work. So I think, like, in order to sustain these things, in order for them to move, and for us not to keep circling the wagons, we have to break through the discomfort of all of the taboos. The taboos aren't that Black people are persecuted anymore. That's not taboo. The new taboos are confounded in many more advanced, hyper manipulative, oppressive tactics. So that's where I'm at with that one.
Awesome. Thank you, Royce. Lots of great points thinking about the systemic nature of some of those issues. Breaking through the discomfort. I love that advice. Absolutely. For our next question, I want to shift the focus a little bit to this idea of finding support in doing that. This one's for Anna and Alana. None of us are really effective change agents just by ourselves, right? We look at the history of social movements, and we always have to get buy-in from allies, from accomplices who help push for change. Look for mentors, right? Last year's conference theme was focused on mentorship specifically. What does support look like for you? What mentors, accomplices, allies inform your work? And how can audience members today serve as allies or accomplices in the work that you do? Anna, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I think this has been said by every panelist so far, the importance of intersectionality and allyship to each other is so important. And I think, as a disabled, pansexual, orphaned woman from another country, I don't tend to be listened to very often. I also look and sound like I'm 12 years old, so I have that going for me. But I'm also white, and there's immense privilege within that. So I have to be both a fighter and an ally, and I think we all do. There's so many parts to each one of us that we have to continue to fight for. And I try, whenever I talk about, especially disability, is the different intersects within that of what it means to be gay and disabled and making pride accessible, or what it means to be a Black disabled man being arrested, and the percentage of increased violence because of the disability, right? So being able to talk about all of those and the intersection of all of those, and make sure that I'm an ally within even the disability community, right? My disability is visible, but I've just started to really learn so much more about cognitive disabilities and invisible disabilities, and making sure that I, again, we talked about how athletes have just kind of been centered around themselves, and that's not a bad thing. Your goal is to go to the Paralympics or the Olympics, or win a championship, but being able to just break down those barriers within your own mind and continue to be an ally within your own community is so important. And just really, again, understanding how they intersect and how different forms of oppressions are made there specifically to hold back different groups of people. And I, as far as allyship for me, I've been so lucky to be working with incredibly strong women and men in my career, and I wouldn't be here without people taking a chance on me, whether it's my parents flying over to Kyrgyzstan and bringing me over to the States, or someone letting me on their swim team, being like, well, maybe she's going to swim in circles. Someone literally said that to my parents, and I was like, I think she'll figure it out. There's lane lines, and so, and moving out to the Olympic Training Center, and then even learning about the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Social and Racial Justice Council. There's so much allyship within that, and I want to make sure that I continue to bring that allyship back and give more than even I receive. And I think allyship doesn't have to be complex, right? It can be as simple as following more diverse accounts on social media. People are sharing their stories every day, so you don't have to ask and put that on someone close to you. Just following people is so, even educating yourself, it can be a passive move. Listen to podcasts. Ibram X. Kendi has an amazingly new podcast that I listened to the second an episode is released. But then also allyship is not only passive, but active, and passing the mic and advocating for more hiring practices, or fighting to, for more exposure of the Paralympics on the TV. And you don't have to be disabled to fight for disabled rights. You don't have to be gay to fight for gay rights. Again, when justice isn't a pie and that you can't section it off, when one person wins, someone doesn't lose, everyone else gets moved up, and that conversation just gets blown up more and more. So I think that's really what allyship is intersectionality and embracing that. We are not all, I'm not just an athlete, I'm not just a woman, I'm not just disabled, and we all have those parts to us. So embracing them and helping things even outside of who you are is so important to be an ally. So that's what it means to me.
Awesome. Alana, same question for you. What does allyship or accomplishment look like for you?
I think Anna said it best. It's just like passing the mic, right? And understanding sort of your place of privilege, whether you're white, Black, or what have you. You do, for instance, in my sort of situation, I do believe that, as an athlete and performing at a high level, you come from a place of privilege. So making sure you use your voice to advocate for others who don't necessarily have that voice is something that is extremely important in our fight moving forward. But in terms of just having that support, it's panels like this, it's conversations like this that sort of provide the space for you to be sort of free in sort of thought and expression that will sort of continue this conversation and make us sort of collectively more powerful. You guys touched on one thing in terms about just having mentors, right? I am at a point in my journey where I'm early on, I'm learning, I am educating myself, I'm having conversations, but I'm also allowing sort of history to sort of, and those activists who sort of, obviously did tremendous things within our country. I'm using those mentors as their journeys as my mentors to just better understand how I can best position myself and be more involved. So no, I appreciate everything that has been said. I think Anna said it best in terms of just making sure that as we climb, as we move, we lift others and create a platform where we can support. So.
Awesome, thank you, Alana. And I'll turn it over to Akila for our final question before the Q&A. Akila.
Yeah, so we've heard so many nuggets of wisdom and so much to be passed on. So I want to first and foremost say thank you to each and every one of you. And I also want to encourage everyone in our audience to connect with each of these amazing panelists via their social media platforms to continue the conversation. And so I wanted to end with a last question. And if we can kind of do it in, I don't know, think of tweet form, this final statement that we could talk about with regards to not only overcoming barriers and challenges, also thinking about lessons learned, but just really understanding how can we use our platform for social change. So one way to think about this is, in our audience today, we may have some people who want to learn more about how they can use their voices to promote social change. For many, the muse is Muhammad Ali, and justifiably so. But for the majority of us, we do not have that Ali status, those networks, and that reach. That said, promoting social justice and driving change is often met with resistance and can be challenging emotionally, and emotionally exhausting, as Royce talked about, again, with our mental health focus, particularly for members of underrepresented and minoritized communities. So based on your experience, and again, share with us briefly, what is something you know now that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your journey as an activist? And what recommendations and or tips do you have for individuals who want to use their voice for activism? And let's start with Race.
I think that's a great question. I think that if I could have shared one thing, I think I would have. I was so shocked by the resistance that came from the organizations and how the reality is that you're not looked at as a human or as a person or as a community or as a activist. You're looked at as a trigger, as an opposition, and as something that is, hurting either the funds or hurting the organization. The reality is that when you speak up, you become the direct opposition of the thing that you're a part of. And for me, that was sport. Even though that seems scary, and for a lot of athletes, that's the fear that we have of speaking up. The reality is that what we're trying to say when we're more than athletes, what we're trying to say when we speak up for people who aren't like us, is that we're humans first, and that above all things is what Muhammad Ali stood for, by not going to war and not fighting against people that never did him harm, by speaking up for his communities, his religious views, and his backgrounds. We're people first, and we're athletes as a game, and it's a privilege, and that resistance that comes along for it, you are holding them accountable by speaking up. You are holding your communities up. You're holding communities that you're not involved with up. And the important thing is to stand strong against that. And the collective, when it happens like it has happened in sports with the NBA, with the WNBA, it protects everyone. The fact that Tommy Smith and John Carlos came a long time before and were the subject of very, very harsh punishments, that reality is different coming into this Olympic Games because there's more of a collective, there's more of a fight against that kind of reaction. And we've seen that change in the USOC, and now we're fighting it in the IOC. So I think that the reality is to present yourself as a human and always remember that you are human first, and your realities and the things you speak up for will be pushed against, but that resistance is important to fight for, and it's important to speak up.
Thank you. Phaedra, next, in tweet form, what advice would you give, or what did you wish you knew now that you didn't know then?
Oh, wow. I think the biggest thing, you said it, Race, is standing up, and it's also making people really stand and profess where they stand, basically. Hold them accountable. That's how you build accountability among people, right? Is to make them really express their position. You don't let them hide behind things. So maybe a hashtag, don't let them hide, right? And I think the thing that, and that's something that I could have probably as a younger athlete and younger person been better at, is just really putting people, creating a space so that people can feel comfortable with standing their ground. But then that's when, truth comes out, and I can then, provide a different perspective, right? Putting it nicely. And then I think in terms of advice for young folks or people out there trying to figure out what social justice cause they wanted to really kind of become involved in, I say just pick something that you're passionate about, because that's when the authenticity comes into play. And then it's also aligning yourself with a channel that's going to be most effective. Not everyone is a social media guru. And so I'd encourage people to join boards, right? Join protest,
There are so many different ways to sort of speak out and make a difference and really push the envelope forward. And so those would be my suggestions, is really put people, if people say they stand for something, make them really profess what that is they stand for. And that gives you the opportunity to really voice where you are, and then you can really kind of see the differences. I don't think there are very few people, I think, who are inherently evil in the world. I think there's good in everyone, despite, I guess, maybe at moments what I believe. But if you can make people sit in their own hot waters and stew in their own juices, that's when you can really, I think, create meaningful change and have people do a lot of self-reflection, so that they can arrive at maybe a different outcome on their own.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, hashtag. And we're going to use that as we continue with the following piece of advice. What is that hashtag that you would share? And also thinking of, as I go to Tony and Royce next, thinking about if there are individuals that you're in that position of leadership, you may be a parent, you may be a coach, you all are organizers, what advice you would give them to support young ones that are coming up? And again, what you know now that you wish you would have known back then. So I go to you, Tony, to provide those recommendations and tips for folks that want to use their voice.
Yeah, thanks. I think for me, reflecting on my own protest, the biggest piece of advice that I think about a lot is that you don't need qualifications to take a stand. I really felt like once I took a stand, now I have to be an expert. I have to actually know specific policy solutions to talk about as a 21-year-old. And I was really hesitant to take more of a visible kind of like focus and accept requests to kind of like play leadership roles. I also think specifically in sports, as soon as you take a stand, people go and try to start citing your game stats and looking for other reasons to say you're not qualified to speak up, you're not good enough, you didn't play last game, whatever. So you don't need qualifications to take a stand. You take a stand and then you keep learning.
Thank you. Royce, what is your hashtag, your steps?
Yeah, I use the hashtag lead. I think just the mentality of commitment to leadership in itself will clarify a lot of your action. I think for me, even, it's hard for me to say what I would tell my younger self, because I came in, being an advocate, right? At 21 years old, I was already saying we need mental health policy across the corporate world now, and we need it yesterday. But I can admit now that even a part of myself was arrogant enough and had this vanity about me where I believed that I could convince the establishment through genuine dialogue that they should just do what's right. And I think that's partly what I would tell young people the most is, it's time for revolution. The awareness campaigns are great, and all of the we have to really assess how dire is our situation in the world, how extreme is the circumstance, and does our actions match that? And at the point where our actions fail to match that, are we actually undermining our own sense of advocacy? And that's what worries me now at 30. And that's what I would tell my 21-year-old self, is that existential understanding is where the real morals lie. And at 30 now I'm anxious, because I'm like, at 21, I had no time to be thinking I was going to convince David Stern that mental health was going to be important, because I thought we were having a genuine conversation. Here he is, probably golfing with the Budweiser executive. He doesn't care about mental health. They're selling beers to parents who are bringing their games and building stadiums with tax dollars and letting parents drive home drunk with their kids. Like, that's their mentality. So I wasted a lot of time for my own selfish reasons, hoping that I could convince them and there could be this kumbaya moment. We need to get past that and get to the revolutionary the energy that we need collectively. We need a collective revolutionary energy. It's very tough for us to create sustainable, transformative change when you have a Malcolm, or you have a Billie Jean King, or you have an Arthur Ashe, or you have a Muhammad Ali, or you have a Colin Kaepernick, or me, or Tommy, or any of those one figures that pop up in anomaly. We need an awakening where people go, we all got it. Like, what's my day job? I'm going to the front lines. I'm going to sit in. I'm going to protest. I love the Occupy Wall Street movement. That was such an appreciated and iconic moment. I think we should go back and reignite Occupy Wall Street. You know, so that's what I would say is like understand the history, study, and see and really truly evaluate, does your advocacy match how extreme you think the conditions are?
Thank you so much. Hashtag lead, definitely. And then we want to end with sort of the way that we started with Anna and Alana, sharing their perspective. And again, what is that hashtag for you? And because again, you were competing, to speak a little bit to even some advice, not only for those that are rising, you know, activists, as I say, but for those that are trying, that could support them, that are in those coaching positions that Ray spoke about earlier, that are in those different sort of leadership and supportive places. Is there any advice that you could give to those individuals, professors, managers, you know, agents, to be able to support their athletes that are that could and may want to take a stand and use their voice? Let's start with Anna.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I apologize if there's background noise. It's time for a bus to go past, apparently. So for my hashtag would be sorry, not sorry. I think as a woman, I constantly apologize for existing, especially as a disabled woman. You know, I'm always, you know, someone could tackle me and I would be like, oh, I'm sorry, I was in your way, you know, and so not apologizing, humbly go into everything that you're doing and understand that you can always learn more, but don't apologize just for beating the social justice drum. You know, I think in every meeting, I'm always, when it's talking about DE&I, I'm always like, you're on disability, you know, and you know, I feel like I have to apologize for that, but it's like, no, this is a fight that needs to be fought. I'm not sorry for that. And I think for the younger generation, sorry, not sorry, like this is stuff that has to be talked about. And if you're not talking about it, no one's talking about it, you know? And I think we saw, and I apologize, this isn't quite, oh, I apologize. Sorry, not sorry. Over the summer, we saw youth were the ones leading these protests. It was young Gen Zers out there just fighting the fight, who are just tired of systems of oppression and who are just ready to fight. And so I think that that power in the network and the collective, as we've all talked about, is just so incredibly powerful. And as far as, you know, a professor or coach, you know, listen, I think is the biggest thing. I feel like as an athlete, I was never listened to, hence why I've had 3 surgeries. I was like, my shoulder hurts. They're like, nah, just go. I was like, oh, like it's broken. And it was. And so, you know, I think the biggest thing is just taking the time to listen, because we're just not listened to, and a lot of people listen to speak, right, and talk over, but it's listen to actually hear and understand what's being talked about and find something for an outlet, right? So you listened and you're like, okay, great, you're interested in this subject. Here's something that you can go after. Have you heard of this, right? So just being that ally and being that mentor to uplift, because it's especially for a younger generation, it's hard to do that. So that would be my long-winded, not tweetable format advice.
Thank you so much. And I think one of the things you pointed out, and I think a lot of that I try to cover as well, is looking back at history, understanding and recognizing that our youth are often at the fore of these social movements. I was born and raised in Topeka, Kansas, so Brown v. Board. You've got, you know, 6, 7, 8-year-olds that are taking the brunt of the movement. Parents are sending them in. So we're making decisions for little ones, for high school kids, for college athletes, and athletes, period, in these spaces without people really sort of understanding the circumstances and the conditions that they're under when they go into these spaces. So thank you for bringing up the youth and the importance of their voice and their lived experience and their efforts that they've had. Alana, I leave the final tweet hashtag to you.
I think tweeting is the perfect platform for me, so I'll keep it short. But just standing in your truth, it would be my hashtag. I believe that, you know, I only wish that when I was sort of coming through my journey, that I had sort of the coaches and you know, those individuals that allowed me to feel comfortable in being who I am and expressing what I wanted to express. So I would, you know, encourage like the coaches today or the professors or what have you to just continue to create that space to be supportive in whatever way that you can to sort of guide the next generation. But just sort of like advice for like the youth or the next generation coming up, just be authentic to who you are. Find something that you're passionate about and hold yourself accountable in being sort of a catalyst for that change that you're striving to push and to emphasize. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All of you dropped some great knowledge and some great tips that we can all utilize no matter who we are and in what respective position, about how to support, about how to serve, about how to be that voice. Next, I'm going to throw the mic to Yannick to be able to perhaps pose a question. At the same time, I want to encourage all those out in the audience, again, to identify and find our panelists and their social media platforms and engage with them to continue the conversation. And oftentimes even, I would say, even join the conversation and see the great work that they're doing. Yannick, to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Akila. And Akila did a great job implementing some of the questions we got into this final round of questions. But there's one follow-up question I want to ask quick, and that is focused on this piece of authenticity that Alana spoke about. Can some of you, and maybe one or two, because we have about 3 minutes left for this session, speak specific to the authenticity? You find that authenticity? What does being authentic? If one or two could speak to that very briefly so we can wrap up on time.
Maybe Phaedra, what does authentic mean to you? What does it mean to be authentic? Great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. We'll do Race and then Phaedra.
I would just say that for me, authenticity is reflection. It's being able to reflect and look at what you're really doing and speak to those around you. You know, one of the first things that I did when I knelt was got in touch with Gwen Berry, had that conversation, make sure that there was a connection and support, and then reflection upon myself to know what I'm really in this for and why I'm really doing these things. That for me is authenticity. And I think that we all need to be reflecting all the time, because as everyone said here, we all had changes throughout our positions and our careers. So for me, it's reflection, self-reflection.
Love that, self-reflection. Phaedra.
Yeah, I agree with you, Race. It is self-reflection. It's truth. It's real. It's whatever you are in that moment, right? And that could change. It may not be the same thing in 6 weeks or 6 years, but true authenticity is evolution. It's real. It's who you are in that moment, but it's also the potential to evolve into something far greater, far more. And so, yeah, that's and being okay with that, and being okay with being right or wrong or whatever other judgment you want to place on it. But it's just being okay with whatever it is, and whatever and whoever and however you are in that moment.
Awesome. And what a way to end it. I want each of you to please join me giving a huge round of virtual applause to our panelists from the athlete panel, to my awesome co-moderator, Dr. Akila, and I will pass it on to Eli and Mary to help lead us into the next equally brilliant panel.